Why, hello there. Welcome to Smart Aspirations with Justin Huff. Sit back, chill out, and go on a journey around the world. Around the world. Justin will discuss tales of hope, discovery, and general irreverence with some of the most dynamic personalities in the travel business. Remember, we do cool shit, and so can you.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Smart Aspirations with Justin Huff. Today, we're thrilled to have photographer extraordinaire Adrian Wlodarczyk joining us from his home in LA. Adrian, man, what's going on?
Hey, Justin, how you doing?
Doing well, man. All things considered, we're getting ready for the holidays, and this episode should come into before Christmas Day. So happy holidays, everybody. Hope everyone's staying safe. And Adrian and I were recent acquaintances, and he showed me a lot of his work for the polar regions, and I was just completely blown away by his product and what he can take care of in the polar regions. And the work is just extraordinary, and it went down a rabbit's hole of seeing a lot of your work, and I was just totally impressed. So most photographers, they kind of dabble in it as a hobby, and then it becomes like a full-time job. How did you start your career in photography?
Probably a little bit similar, actually. I got a background in project management, and this is when I was back in Australia.
Oh wow!
And I was always interested in photography, and I guess I just took on more and more workloads. I was living down in Melbourne, close to the coast there, and started doing. I picked up a few jobs for Rip Curl, the surf company. Okay. And I guess that was part of growing up too in Australia. It was always the beach, and it was the outdoors, and it was I remember in my parents' home we also we'd have a whole bookshelf full of National Geographic magazines, the yellow spine. So that was always there in the background, and so going out and wanting to see the world was something that I had there as well. So I picked up a few jobs for Rip Curl, and then from there I slowly transitioned from project management into. I started freelancing a lot more as a photographer, and then went to a few World Surf Tour events. And this was back in 2010. I went to a few around the world, like in Puerto Rico and in the States and things like that. And then from there, I did that for a couple of years in Australia, and then I moved over here to LA. In early 2013, and I ran a photography business here. Okay. As basically the manager and the photographer. And
was that move to LA to be kind of where the action was, so to speak, from a surfing perspective, like expedition photography?
It wasn't at that point. I was more about picking up the opportunities here in LA. I picked up a little bit of surf work here when I first got here, but of course you need to expand your business once you're in the city. So I just picked up to work wherever I could, photography wise, while still maintaining my connection with the surf community. And then I had the opportunity to go to Antarctica. Okay. And then so I grabbed that with both hands, and
oh hell yeah,
and the rest is history, as they say.
Well, that's if you consider like the whole scheme of things in terms of timing. So it's just a lot's happened for you in a little bit of time, man.
Yeah, it went very quickly. I think 2013 till now, and probably the last year has been a bit of a write-off, so we can sort of we can subtract a year, but
let's take that off. That's like a mulligan or a do-over, basically.
Yeah. So and by the time you go down to the Antarctic or the Arctic for a couple of seasons and do all of those sorts of things, time goes pretty quickly.
Well, I mean, and backing up to your first trip to Antarctica, I mean, how did that come about, and what was like, was there a moment where things just kind of clicked in your head when you first got there? Like, okay, this is what I'm going to do.
I think, well, I'll backtrack it back even further to the National Geographic magazines. I suppose I always wanted to go there. That was, it was always an aspiration of mine to get to Antarctica, to get to the Arctic. Gotcha. And I always knew I also just didn't want to go, just for one trip. I wanted to spend some time down there or up there and immerse myself in that environment and try and get as much as I can out of it, both personally and photography wise. And it's sort of, when you go to these places, it's you realize how much one visit sort of, you get a lot out of one visit. It's amazing how much you see and how much each place changes and all of that sort of thing, and the variety of things that, well, the variety of opportunities that you get to take while you're there. But the longer time or the longer length of time that you spend in these places, it's amazing to watch how an untouched world basically just runs itself and alters.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Itself. Yeah, it does.
Well, when you first having those National Geographic photography moments when you were younger, were you more drawn to the landscape or the wildlife, both?
It was probably just the place in general. And so in Antarctica, I was probably more drawn to the landscape.
Okay.
But with the Arctic, I was more drawn to the wildlife.
That's a good way. Yeah.
So
way to put it.
It's not that I don't like the wildlife in Antarctica, and not that I don't like the landscape in the Arctic, but
right.
I think they're the two major draw cards for me, and especially in Antarctica with the ice. That is the. I was thinking about this the other day of, like I do love it down there, and you see the mountain ranges and you've got the wildlife and all that, but it's the ice formations and just
it's gnarly.
It's gnarly, but it's so gorgeous too, and it just changes so much. It's beautiful.
Well, just the photos that you showed me and what I've seen on your socials and on your website, I mean, just the sheer color, like the differences just between with the ice and the mountains and the water, it's just completely insane, especially when you talk about the lighting with the sunsets, just unfreaking believable.
I mean, nothing's ever the same down there. You've got a million different shades of blues. You've got 500,000 different shades of oranges and pinks and all of that sort of thing. It's just you really want to be awake for every daylight minute just to soak it all in, because it just changes, and it could, what starts off appears to be an average day could turn into the best photography day that you've ever had in your life, with the way that the weather, or a whale might pop up, or you might pull into a cove or a bay or something, and it's pristine still, and there's just wildlife everywhere. Whatever it is, it's you just never know what's going to be underneath that next rock that you look under.
Well, I think that's really good to know beforehand, because you've got to have an open mind and you be completely flexible to what's going on with not just the wildlife behavior, but you're in an extreme environment. I mean, just you can't control that. And I think that's super important to the experience and the guest, because if you go in there, and we tell this to our guests going to Africa all the time, it's like you can't make Mother Nature behave.
No, you can't. And that's, you mentioned before about the light, like photography wise, especially, well, it's both in Antarctica and the Arctic. It does a lot of things. I won't say weird things, because they're natural to those places, but they do a lot of things that you don't see anywhere else in the world. One of the more distinctive things I remember is, or that you see all the time, is especially in Antarctica, and especially on a bright blue sunny day, everything within a few miles that you're looking at is it look, you know, the blues and the whites and everything's pretty crystal clear, and it just looks like it should. And then way off in the distance on the horizon line, it's got like this tobacco layer. And it looks like full-on pollution just above the horizon line.
Oh, shit.
And you think, well, the first time you see it, you think, well, we're in Antarctica. Surely there's no pollution down here, and it's not. It's just the color emitted by the sunlight going through the different wavelengths at that distance. It looks yellow. So
totally wild phenomenon.
You got to get your head around that, and you know, obviously that disappears when there's a beautiful sunset, which might go through, you know, yellow, orange, red, purple, pink.
Yeah.
You know, all in the space of half an hour. It really is amazing. And then, especially with photography, like getting used to those colors and just changing your settings to compensate for, you know, a few of the phenomena that happen down there, so they edit a little bit better later on is something that takes a bit of time as well. Yeah,
time and experience, and I'm sure that we'll get to like how you add value to the different expeditions that you lead in a little bit. I know that having a photographer there to somebody that's kind of aspiring is super helpful. But you know, taking just focusing on Antarctica itself, tell us about the journey to get down there. How was that? What's that like?
It can be long, but
it's going all the way down to the bottom of the globe.
It's part of the experience, right? It's part of the adventure. I think it's you know, you don't get the cherry on top without getting through the rest of it first. And you know, Antarctica is a cherry. So you know, obviously you got to get down to either southern Chile or southern Argentina first.
Yep. And
then depending on what you select or whatever you want to do, you have two options from that point. So you can either get on a yacht or a boat in either Punta Arenas or Ushuaia,
right.
And then go across the Drake, which, you know, is quite famous or infamous, I suppose.
Depending on your interest and how you look at it,
and depending on your level of Dramamine and seasickness,
I'd be popping pills.
Oh, really? I'm one of the lucky ones. I don't get seasick, so I'm actually okay. But you know, I've been down there quite a number of times, and it's probably half and half. You know, okay. Especially with the weather forecasting technology that the boats have got these days. More often than not, you know, big nasty weather systems will pass through reasonably quickly.
Yeah.
And you know, the captains will just make a decision as to, right, we're going to hang out here for 6 hours and let the storm pass, and then it's still going to be a little bit rough, but
right,
it won't be as rough, and they just try and maneuver around that. So you know, the Drake takes anywhere. There's no set time. It depends on the weather, but you know, it might take anywhere between say 30 to 48 hours to cross that.
Okay. I've told guests crossing the Drake before that it's just basically 2 days, and like you said, with the navigation equipment and the technology available to just take the smoothest route possible. It's not like it has been in the past, but as a cherry on top, as you've said, it's awesome for people that are keen birders, right?
Absolutely. And just to go back to your point, like the 48 hours is probably a safe assumption. Yeah. And that way people are expecting that, and whatever you get on top of that is a bonus. And it's bonus. And on the way down there, absolutely, the bird life is quite phenomenal. You know, especially once you cross the Antarctic convergence, and you know, you feel the temperature come down a bit. Right. Obviously, the water temperature has come down at that point, and you know, the albatross and the skewers and the petrels and all of that sort of thing that are flying around off the back of the boat. It's absolutely amazing. Especially the albatross, like they're just, you know, really great big birds. You just wonder how they stay at sea that, you know, for so long. They can spend months and months out at sea and just floating around on effortlessly, you know, doing
It's like you see these birds and they're kind of caught in this thermal. It's just kind of gliding around. It's like, how is that even possible? Dude?
Well, when they get a bit close, and some of them are, they feel like they're in arm's reach because they're that close to the boat sometimes, and they get up close and you realize, well, that's an 8-foot wingspan. That's how they're doing it. It's.
All right, I'm 6'2". You're tall. You're how tall are you?
I'm 6'2" as well.
I
Yeah.
was gonna say you seemed almost taller than me, man.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. But like, if you have an 8-foot wingspan, that's insane.
That's it, and that's probably an average. There's bigger ones and smaller. Yeah.
Shit.
It's
Wow.
but you get the variety of that wildlife coming down there, and then as you get a bit closer, there might be a chance of a floating iceberg or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's building up the excitement again.
The excitement and experience. When you actually get to the Antarctic Peninsula, assuming this is the route you're taking, and
Sure.
you're starting off with the peninsula, how does it work in terms of landing sites and under like really good conditions and what type of wildlife you can experience? Tell me a little bit about that.
I guess that's a choice that we would sit down and we'd pre-plan that a little bit, but we would also make that decision based on weather conditions once you get down there.
Oh, and just I want to briefly interject, just real briefly, and we'll get back
Sure.
into that. We're talking about private charters 100% on this. This is for the listeners. I know that,
Yes.
and you know that, but the listeners, this is not like a book-in with a big ship with a bunch of other people. We're talking private charters, and so you have total flexibility. So
Definitely, and that's part of it. Yeah. So once people book a private charter and they book me to go on it as the expedition leader and the photographer,
right.
I try and sit down or Zoom with people and find out and give them as much information as possible. And this is part of it. So we can give ourselves target points of when we get down there. Mm-hmm. And like I said, that may or may not be affected by weather as well. Yeah. Once you actually get there. So before you get to the peninsula, you have the South Shetland Islands, which you actually hit first. So you may make the choice of making your first landing there, because it still is from the South Shetlands across the strait down there. To get to the peninsula proper, it's still quite a few hours of sailing away. So it's always good to just get your feet on land or just find a nice. Exactly, and if it's been a rough ride, you can just park it in a sheltered cove for half a day and just relax a little bit and let everyone chill. But that's if you choose to head down there. You might choose to go a bit further away and head up towards the Antarctic Sound, which is right at the tip of the peninsula, and sort of cross over into the Weddell Sea over there, and that might be another option. So it really depends on what you discussed prior, and like I said, the weather, and it's also what's booked and what's not. Antarctica is becoming very popular. So there's a lot of yachts down there. There's a lot of boats down there. A lot of ships down there. So trying to get, and obviously IATO monitor who's landing at whatever sites, and a lot of those sites are booked 6 months prior. But there's still a lot of other options out there, but you have to obviously maneuver around those bookings. Sure. So
and I know that guests that are going to be spending the money on a private charter experience, they're not going to want to go where all the larger expedition ships are going with all.
No, and that's what we're trying to provide too. Is just trying to get away from that. I mean, even the largest ships try and stay away from each other as well, because you want the experience down there that you haven't got the place to yourself, but you like to feel like you got the place to yourself.
And you want your photos to have the place to themselves.
Exactly. So, we do our best to try and stay as far away as from other people as possible. Definitely.
Well, can you? I know that going down to Antarctica, there's a hell of a lot of history, especially with European exploration. Do you see any of that on the expeditions that you do?
Absolutely. There's a lot of history there, and a lot of the more popular historical landing sites.
Sure.
Is
things like that. Or is that more like South Georgia kind of a thing?
Shackleton is more South Georgia.
Okay.
And Shackleton went around. Well,
this is my ignorance coming into play.
Sure. But the side of the peninsula that most people visit, Shackleton's not really famous for visiting that place. But, it was guys like Bransfield and Gerlache and people like that that really got down there.
Tell me about the book that you have.
Okay, so with the history, and something that I would recommend to anyone that's interested in going to Antarctica, or just anyone that's interested in Antarctica itself, there's a book by John Booth called The Storied Ice.
Okay.
And it basically runs all the way back to the pioneering explorers that went down there, as far back as James Cook, when he was the first one to circumnavigate Antarctica. So. And it comes right up to recent history, and especially with the peninsula, it really runs through a lot of the place names, the points, because a lot of them are named after a lot of those pioneering explorers. Yeah, absolutely. But and going back to the history in a lot of the places. So, it's a lot of the bases are built on sites that have a historical significance. Mm-hmm. There's a Argentinian base called Esperanza, and
I've heard of that.
And that's actually on the site of a very famous. Well, you would call it an expedition, but it was basically a failed expedition, but a marvelous survival story. And without going into it, a couple of guys on that site had to survive for months and months and months in basically a rock shelter that they built, and they've built replicas of those rock shelters to scale on there. It's crazy.
What an existence.
And like old huts and things like that. It's you do find them scattered, but as part of the I'm not sure if it's IATA or the Antarctic Treaty, countries are responsible for all the buildings down there that actually own the buildings. So if they're not being used or if they're not manned, they have to get rid of those buildings and basically clean it up, unless there's some historical significance.
Got it.
So, there's one place called Portal Point, which is on the peninsula. I really like it. It's a nice spot, and there's a lot of beautiful icebergs that seem to gather there and pass through there. But you can see the stumps of where there was a building there.
That's cool.
Years and years ago, but obviously they've removed it, but the stumps are still there. But that actual hut, they basically just picked it up, and it's sitting in a museum in the Falkland Islands as is. Cool. So I mean, when you talk about going down to Antarctica, that's actually another option. Is to you can go through the Falklands and then down into Antarctica, or you can go to South Georgia then down into Antarctica as well, and go to places like Elephant Island and things like that, and then the Shackleton significance increases from that point.
To my uneducated point. Well, I mean, so it ticks the list for people that are doing history buffs. What about people that are interested in wildlife? What can they expect to see down there?
In wildlife, I think that's the beauty about Antarctica, is that from the beginning of the season, which is might be towards the end of November or mid-November, to about mid-March, I would say, early to mid-March would be the end. You can expect to see different things. I mean, the one constant down there are the penguins.
Penguins, I imagine.
Yeah. And on the peninsula, you've got the three main types of penguins down there. But you see them go through different stages. Like when you go down there early in the season, everything's still covered in white, because it's the penguins are just, because they only come to land to breed, otherwise they're out at sea for the rest of the year. So
that's true. Yeah, I didn't even think about that, actually.
Yeah, so they've just sort of got there. Everything's still pristine and white. There's a lot of snow. There's a lot of sea ice around, because the winter sea ice is breaking up. And obviously the seals are there chasing the penguins, or the leopard seals obviously are chasing the penguins. But some of the other seals, you sort of start to see them as well. And then as it progresses through December and January, the penguins have mated and they build their mounds, and they go from eggs to chicks and all of that sort of thing in early January, and then that progresses through January, all that cute phase.
Yeah.
But
there's like a hatching season. Is there like a special term for it that you call it?
Not really.
It's
just
the penguin babies being born.
Yeah.
Is that?
It's just, I suppose it's just hatching season, right? I mean, the season would imply that there was a set time, but you get a lot of early bloomers, you get a lot of late bloomers, it's the
luck of the draw, basically.
Basically, I mean, the bulk of them, if you go down there in early January time, you're going to see, the hatchlings once they first come out. So, and then, but of course, as that time grows longer, the penguins have been on land for longer. The snow's melted. It's a little bit dirtier around their rookeries and things like that. So, the landscape changes there. A bit of the ice has dissipated and the snow's melted. So, but in saying that, that's when you see a lot more, or tend to, there's no guarantees with wildlife, but you tend to see a lot more seals coming to shore. And then obviously the bird life is still there. And as the eggs and the chicks are ever more present, the predatory birds are hanging around a lot more. So that changes as well. Yeah, absolutely. And then as you get into February and into March, it's the whales are more prominent. So
that was I was going to ask about whales. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I mean, there's a chance to see whales whenever you're down there, and you could basically, you're most likely going to see them most of the time. But as the season goes longer, especially in that February period and into March, there's just so many around usually that sometimes it's just ridiculous. That's the experiences that I've had with whales are just,
I believe you, man. I mean, I most of my experience is in Africa, but I was in, this is Africa too, but a little bit different. I was in Madagascar, and I was on a diving expedition, and we were out in the boat, and I saw my first humpback whale, and it was so close. And these things, they're fucking huge.
Oh yeah.
I can't describe. It's just so, and it was like one of those it couldn't have even been more perfect. It breached, and it just did the whole spin around thing where you can see the chest. It was just, and none of us were expecting it, so nobody has their camera out or anything. It just happened, and it's just like, oh my god. I mean, to somebody who's not seen a whale before, these creatures are. I can't explain it. There's. My words will not do it justice.
You can't do it justice. I was in a Zodiac once with two other people, and you can't get too close to the whales, but the whales can get close to you. So it's it just depends. And we were actually making our way back to the boat after seeing 3 or 4 whales in a distance, and we had to stop because there was another whale crossing. So we stopped, and without us realizing, the 4 other guys that were behind us caught up to us and were basically coming up, breathing and ducking under the boat. Like it was, their pec fins were just hitting the. It was. We thought we were going in. It was just so. You know, we're pulling memory cards out of cameras and putting them in our pocket just in case we're going.
That's amazing.
And they were even too close to take photos, right? If I had reached over the side of the boat, they were there.
They were there. Yeah, you can't photograph
it's
that.
Crazy.
You just got to experience that and just kind of.
You just gotta. Yeah, I just put the camera down and just went right. Just soak it in. Yeah.
That's the best, man. That's amazing.
And there's just countless of experiences like that I've had down there. It really is amazing. And you know, there has been a couple of big pods of killer whales actually down.
Okay.
That cruise around the peninsula as well. So if you're lucky enough to stumble across them, they tend to. I won't say they tend to get attracted to the boat, but they're quite inquisitive as well. So
I can imagine.
You can,
yeah.
It's
and hungry.
and hungry.
Well, I mean, it's such a massive place, and to get down there, I know it's accessible. What about? I mean, are there like alternatives to crossing the Drake?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're a bit worried about the seasickness, across there, so you can board a plane in Punta Arenas, and it's around a 2-hour flight time, down to King George Island, just off the peninsula there.
Yeah, that's just north of the peninsula, right?
And then there's an airstrip on there, and the yachts can meet you down there, and you get picked up from there, and then you can go cruising around. You know, it's some people like that, but I think that the jury's out. It's sort of 50-50 on which one's better, because as I said at the start, people see that journey across the Drake as a rite of passage, sort of thing. Yeah.
Say like I crossed the Drake. That's really cool.
And
I would want to do it. I would pump myself full of Dramamine and just do it.
But I think it's a good thing, you know. It's not like you have to earn the right to go to Antarctica, but I think part of it is this is where you're at the bottom of the earth, you know. Let's do it justice, sort of thing.
Yeah, be your own Magellan, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, there's an entire different side of the globe, obviously, and especially we're just chatting about wildlife too and logistics, and you cover the Arctic so well, and that's the term Arctic. It's such a huge kind of like an umbrella encompassing term, and there's such a huge territory that could be. I mean, you cover Svalbard, Greenland, you know, Baffin Island in Canada. There's so many different places there. What are some of the main Arctic destinations that you cover, and talk to me a little bit about the logistics of accessing these?
Sure, and you're right. Like the Arctic is just it's huge. It covers a wide expanse, and Antarctica is big, but there's only a finite amount of places that you can visit. Whereas the Arctic, there are so many options. So you can go into Svalbard, which of course is famous for the polar bear population up there.
Yes.
And that archipelago there, and then just below that you've got Iceland. So you can fly into Svalbard and board your yacht there.
Easy
enough, and you can fly into Iceland. And then from there you can access Greenland. And like you said, there's Baffin Island and parts of Canada. And if you're really adventurous, you can board at any of those places and do the Northwest Passage.
Yes.
And then go.
Have you done that?
I haven't done the Northwest. No.
That would be amazing. No. Oh my God! It was probably like a 2-month journey or something crazy.
Obviously it's up to you, right? It's the ball is in the client's court as to how long they want to spend on the yacht and how long you want to take going from A to B.
Right.
But I think it's roughly about 3 to 4 weeks if you really wanted to make a lot of lot of stops, but a reasonable amount of stops and see a few things and take your time with your photography and things like that. It's a reasonable consideration would be about three weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about the Drake being, a rite of passage. This would be the ultimate rite of passage.
Well, it's through northern Canada up there, and then of course you got the northeast passage,
Right. Oh, that's true.
Which is above Russia. But
well, let's talk about Svalbard real quick. I mean,
sure.
It's a lot of people they've probably heard Svalbard or Spitsbergen, and I know it's part of Norway technically speaking, but where is it, and what I know you'd mentioned polar bears before. What other wildlife encounters can guests expect to get there?
Sure. So yeah, it is just north of Norway. It's sort of northeast of Iceland, and it's it's hard to describe with Greenland to the left of it.
We'll put it on that.
Yeah. So there's Greenland to the west of it, and then it sits pretty high up into the Arctic, and apart from Franz Josef Land and the islands above Russia, it's probably the highest, or one of the highest physical land masses that's easily accessible in that region. So it's and because it freezes, basically it gets frozen most of the way around in during winter as the Arctic grows. Although we're seeing that change. The Arctic, the Arctic ice ebbs and flows differently each year, and different sections might branch out a bit further. So one year the ice might be a bit more prominent down through over Svalbard and over Europe. And not be so much so through the Bering Strait or down above Russia and Alaska, but then other years, that might differ. So,
it just depends.
It just depends, and I think that's the major factor of the bears being on Svalbard itself and some of the islands that surround that is the ice reaches there, and it's easily accessible to them. So. It really is it's a wonderful place to do an expedition. It's especially with a lot of the smaller charters or the smaller yachts that we go on. We do get access to sides of the main island, and the other that the bigger expedition ships just can't go there. No.
And is there a more desired or ideal side of the island that where the wildlife is, and you can expect better viewing?
So the bigger ships generally have to stick to the west of the island. Yeah. The east is it's not reserved, but they don't let the bigger ships go into there. So it's roughly ships with 100 guests or fewer. That's not a hard and fast rule. Obviously, there's other exceptions. There's other rules and stuff that we're not going to go into right now. But it's
not good podcast material.
No. So, but with the smaller yachts, whether we're on a yacht with 10 people, 12 people, 20 or 30, generally we get into those preferred areas on the East Coast where. It's a little bit segregated. It's a little bit more segregated, a little bit more isolated. You can explore a little bit more, cool. And on some of the vessels as well, depending on which yacht you charter, I have access to icebreakers, so we can actually, if the ice is thin enough, we can actually go into the ice, drop anchor, and get off the boat and just walk around in the. On top of the ice, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh my God! You just have a little champagne sundowner kind of a thing.
That's definitely an option. Yeah,
that's awesome. Tell us a little bit. I mean, can you do things like that in Greenland, where it's more like land based, or is that just kind of like a unique Svalbard thing?
It's not a unique Svalbard thing. I mean, you can do that in Antarctica if you're on an icebreaker.
Okay.
And if you got the right conditions, obviously, it's just that it's probably more likely that the conditions are going to suit better.
Got it.
In Svalbard, because of the Arctic ice is a yearly, or the fringes of it are a yearly occurrence. Okay. The ice is a little bit thinner, and you can do that. But yeah, around Greenland, and if there's ice around, you can absolutely have that experience. You know, some nice rosé with some brie cheese while you're sitting on the ice. Why not? You know,
right? Yeah, why not?
And looking at a pink. Good, because you can, and looking at the northern lights, trying to photograph them. You know, like what? It doesn't get much better than that.
No, it doesn't. Well, I mean, you just mentioned Greenland again. I mean, I'm looking at my map now. Greenland is insanely huge.
It is insanely huge.
How do you pick and choose where to go in Greenland? How would you get there?
You're a little bit dictated to by regulations of Greenland, but generally it's the west coast.
West coast. Western.
Which and that's opposite basically what you mentioned before, Baffin Island of Canada.
Right.
And so going up into that strait there, you've got options either west or east, and you know a lot of that. Once again, a lot of that is prior planning. If the guests want to really go and see Greenland, well, we're going to go to Greenland. But if Baffin Island and Canada is an option, we can try and accommodate that. Yeah, while we're there, definitely.
Amazing trip.
And it's the distances too. You know, it's partly to do with logistics. You know, if we can fuel up, and you know, if you see Greenland and then fuel up, and then if you've got the time, that's the other thing. If you want to take the time and go over, well, you can do that as well. I mean, and that's why it's important, I think, to communicate before we go about exactly what the guest wants to do, or it's absolutely because it is such a vast area, and the experiences can be so different from one place to another, and there's absolutely no way you could go up there, and well, you could if you spent 6 months on a boat, I suppose. But it's there's no way within a 2-week period that you're going to go from Svalbard to Iceland to Baffin to Greenland. You know, you sort of got to pick your poison for that trip and run with it. But I mean, it's pretty hard to be disappointed anywhere in that part of the world, I think.
Well, I'd imagine that, like, when you're choosing between either one or the other or both, I mean, Baffin Island, Greenland, I'd imagine you get a lot of Inuit culture that's up there too. Which kind of...
There is, and there's a lot of villages that are on the table that people can visit if you choose to do so. You know?
That would be extremely cool.
Yeah, and the locals are generally quite friendly, and depending on how much culture you want to immerse yourself in, that's you know, cultural performances, or you know, a town with specific museums or you know, structures or something like that. We can look for those prior to leaving and say, okay, well, we're going to aim for there, and if that's what you want to experience, we can do that as well. So it's it really is, and just seeing the way that these people live up there, it's
insane. You know, you have like these really just, frankly speaking, hostile environments for 10 months out of the year.
Basically, yeah.
And how people adapt to that. And there's another destination that you cover too that's obviously got amazing cultural opportunities, and seeing how people live there and the history and how things evolve. You also lead expeditions to the Russian Far East, and I mean, it's got to be one of the most diverse and incredible places on the planet. Tell us a little bit about that and what guests can experience.
It's the Russian Far East. It is a loaded question. It's. I mean, you basically said it right there, right? It's just so diverse and it's so amazing. Yeah. I mean, apart from Antarctica, the Russian Far East is probably my favorite. It's
sure.
And it is such a wonderful experience. And you know, once again, depending what people decide or guests decide what they want to do, you know, there's the beauty of the Kuril Islands leading up to the Kamchatka Peninsula.
Right.
You know, there's places like Yankicha Island that looks like it should be in Hawaii somewhere.
I don't even know. What is that? What is it?
Yankicha Island. There's actually another Russian name for it, but
I gotta stick a map up.
I can't remember what the other name is, but and it's a really long one.
Okay.
But it looks like it should be in Hawaii somewhere, you know, and it's
such
just
a volcanic part of the world.
And it's a caldera, and you can go with the zodiacs when the tide's right on the inside of it. And you know, there's a couple of bubbling hot springs and things like that there as well, just to add to the volcanic feel.
Right.
And then it's basically just covered in long grass, you know, grasslands, and you can hike to the top and the edge of the caldera and just look down on. It's amazing.
That's gorgeous.
This
is totally separate from Kamchatka.
Yeah.
You said it's south of there? Oh my God.
This is in the Kuril Island chain.
Islands. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
wow.
But then you have other islands there that are just covered in seals, basically. You know, it's just rocks and seals. But you know, so you go from that experience, then you go up to Kamchatka, which is another experience altogether
it's an otherworldly planet, I'd guess.
Yeah, and there's places like the Supernova River, which is world famous for its fishing.
Okay.
You know, a lot of anglers go there, but you know, it's when we were there last, we got pretty close to a Russian brown bear. He was absolutely. We were in the Zodiac, so you just get in the Zodiacs and cruise along the river. I mean, the main attraction there is the Stella's sea eagle, which is the biggest eagle in the world.
Say the name again.
Stella's sea eagle.
Okay, that's important to me. Biggest eagle in the world.
Biggest eagle in the world, and it's they're amazing birds. And you know, the times that I've been there, I've generally seen either a couple or, you know, one time I went there, I think we saw like 15 in just one cruise. It was great. But it's you know, marshy, tall grasslands, sort of swamp. So the bears just cruise through there as well. We were in the Zodiac, and there was a Russian brown bear probably not 20 feet away, you know, just popped out, and So
yeah, the Russian bear stereotype becomes alive.
Suffice to say, the guest in the Zodiac got some pretty decent photos.
Sure. I can only imagine. I mean, Jesus, wow. Well, I mean, if you're exploring like Kamchatka, I mean, I imagine, like, how does it work? I mean, you land at a specific site with the vessel, and then you explore the interiors via helicopter, road transfer. How does that work?
In general, I try and stay with the water access most of the time.
Sure. So,
you know, there are things that can be organized, but most of the places that we do get into via the yachts.
Yeah.
You know, there's as you go further north up Kamchatka, you know, we go past islands that are sitting just off the coast that are. And the coastline is just littered with volcanoes that are, you know, snow covered but active at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, the landscape is just otherworldly. It's like you're on another planet somewhere.
I hate to say Mars because it's dry, but like I can imagine it's totally.
I actually nearly said Mars myself, but it's
the volcanoes. Yeah.
But I mean, you're standing there on the boat, and you just, oh my God, like this is. It's nuts. Yeah. It's and most the times that I've been to, it's a place called Udashut Island, and where I've always got a bright sunny day there, and so there's this big rocky green island surrounded by these, you know, volcanic activity around, snow covered volcanic activity, and it's just it's amazing. And of course there's a bunch of wildlife there. But as you go up the coast even further, you know, we go into a lot of fjords and things like that where you just can't get access to with roads, and there's enough to see via the ocean and via the yachts that once again it's how much time do you want to spend there, you know. If you want to spend a month in Kamchatka, well, we can organize. We can do it. We can organize some land-based activities, and and things like that. You know, seeing the Russian Orthodox churches and things like that is another factor. And you know, there's some towns there like Petropavlovsk, Providenia, Providenia and Anadyr and places like that. So yeah, you can get around to those places as well. But you know, if you're going to go to Russia, you want to see parts of, you know,
the natural landscape, wildlife and everything, but there's still this Russian part of it.
Absolutely, and it's the culture there as well. You know, you can and we go over to the Commander Islands as well, which are the very last islands on the Aleutian Island chain, which go over to Alaska.
Yeah,
and you know, you can go over to Nikolskoye, which has a very big cultural base there too. So it's.
Well, I'd imagine that. I mean, having lived in Russia, I'd imagine that you, even though Russia's like this ginormous country that covers 11 different time zones, it's kind of impossible to escape Russia without having some pretty decent stories to share. Or does anything come to your mind that you can share on the podcast?
There's a few that I won't share, but but I'm quite happy to share it with anyone that comes on the yacht with me. That's okay. But yeah, I mean, it's all about experiences, I suppose, and and I think this is true of Antarctica as well. You know, people have expectations, and they know what they want to see, and they know what they think a place is going to look or feel like or something. Yeah. But once they get to somewhere like either Antarctica or the Russian Far East, it's just it overwhelms people. You know, right. So it's about those personal moments and personal experiences, and I think what I've seen, you know, in Antarctica many times, just sort of running back to that, you see someone, you go on a landing and you see someone just sitting out by themselves, just looking at, you know, the landscape or some wildlife or something, and you know, I'll be walking past and are you okay? And you know, they'll have a tear in their eye because they're just so overwhelmed with with that experience, and they can't believe where they are, but B, they can't believe what they're seeing as well while they're there. It's just amazing. Right there. And in Russia, you know, it's especially Kamchatka, it looks otherworldly, but you just and some of the landscapes look similar to different parts of the world, but I think part of what comes out of there is the personal experiences. You know, like I landed once we went. We've actually gone past Kamchatka up into the Chukchi Sea. Yeah. After going through the Bering Strait and into the Russian Arctic there, and we're in a village called the Yulin village. Okay. And you know, there's a few museums, and they let people wander through the village and things like that. And you know, it really is just a good semblance of, or a resemblance of Arctic life for Russian Inuit. And you know, the landing was drawing to a close, and we was sort of standing around, and I was a bit off by myself, and I felt something tugging at the back of my jacket, and I turned around and I couldn't see anything, but then I looked down and there's this little girl. She must have been like 7 years old, 8 years old, something like that. And you know, she stopped tugging and she just handed something to me. She put her hand up and you know, gave me something. And what she gave me was this. And
oh my gosh.
It's
like a bone of sorts.
Well, I thought it was a shell when she first gave it to me, and it's got a carving of a whale in it. And
that's so cool.
It's a whale ear bone. Right,
ear bone.
Ear bone, yeah.
Oh my! Put it up again. What is?
And she, yeah, it's. I don't know. I'll see if I can see they've carved it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it.
It's
that is insane.
She just handed it to me, and I took it out of her hand, and she sort of just smiled and then ran away, and her mother was standing about 30 or 40 feet away. And she just, you know, rejoined her mother, and they both turned and smiled to me and walked back into the village. And it was, you know, that's something I'll remember forever. It was quite a personal moment, and it's, of course, you know, it's something that can happen, on these experiences.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's one of those things you can't plan for. It's just one of those organic things that happens.
There's that experience, and then there's I suppose you'd call it a educational experience. We went to we went further westward. We were heading towards Wrangel Island, which is just above into the Russian Arctic there, which is a massive polar bear nursery up there as well.
Oh, cool.
And it's highly protected by the Russian government as a wilderness area and all of that sort of thing. There's a few documentaries online about Wrangel. It's such an amazing place. But on the way there, we stopped at another village called Vankarum, and that's where the polar bears are actually on the mainland at that point as well. Mm-hmm. And we encountered a couple there, but just out of the village. But I remember landing at that village one of the first times I went there, and so the Russians will provide, if we organise it, bear guards basically, which are just some of the local hunters with a rifle on their back, and they sort of just make sure everything's going to be kosher depending on how far you want to walk around the village. And then when I landed there, I noticed that they had a stick, like a broomstick, 6 foot long, and at one end there was a metal hook hanging off the end of it. And at the other end was just a flat bit of steel, probably 6 to 8 inches long, 1/4 inch thick. And it's, and I was inquisitive, so I got the interpreter and I asked them what this stick was. And it turns out that they're a native ice testing stick is what they're called.
Whoa.
But they use it, and this is what the bear guard said. He said, "Well, it comes in handy for a lot of things. We can." So they use the hook if they're on the boat and they need to, if they've hunted an animal or they've trying to get some netting or fish or something, they can utilize the hook for that. And if they can test the ice with the flat end, or they can punch a hole through the ice as well. Yeah. And he said it also comes in handy if a polar bear's rearing up on you. You can sort of stick it up and use it as a bit of protection. And then he said, well, it also comes in handy if the polar bear's being a bit too cheeky and walking through town. We can walk up to the polar bear and whack it on the end of the nose with the end of the stick.
Have fun with that.
And I'm thinking only in Russia would you walk up to a polar bear and
only in Russia. That's so wacky, man.
Yeah.
Jeez, I mean, like from all of these, the cool thing about all of this, from Antarctica to the Arctic to the Russian Far East, I mean, everything that we've discussed are things that aren't, they're not planned in advance. They're not fabricated. Everything is authentic. And one of the things that I really want to address and that I want people to understand is all of this is bespoke and tailor-made. This is, and when you have the private charter all to yourself and it's your dream, I mean, I can't imagine a more personalized experience, and especially with where we are in the world right now, where we are in the timeline of the history of this planet, I couldn't imagine a better experience coming out of everything right now.
I think, and that's the beauty of having the private charter is and I really enjoy it too. Is that and like I've said through this session, it's I try and communicate as much as I can before, and there's a certain amount of planning going into. Okay, well, if we want to go visit this spot and this spot and this spot, we sort of have to, we need to either book or let authorities know or something like that. But there's a whole bunch of flexibility around that as well.
Sure.
You've either got 10 of your friends or 20 of your friends on these charters. And sure, we may have, in the space of 2 weeks, we might have 6 destinations that we've planned on seeing. Based on either my experience or what the guest wants to go and visit or see or photograph or whatever they want to do. Mm-hmm. But then once we're there, it's really up to us, and it's up to the group as a whole to say, okay, well, this, if we've plowed through some ice and dropped anchor, in the Arctic somewhere, and the sun's about to set, and that looks like a really good spot, and a polar bear pops up. Well, let's stay here a bit longer. Let's just do that. Or someone's mentioned that there's something around the corner. Okay, well, let's leave that. Let's go around there.
Yeah.
It is totally bespoke, and that's the beauty of it, is that people really do get their money's worth, as in it's group decisions, and it's doing what people want to do. Under the I suppose the guidance and the advice of myself and the ship's crew.
The ship captain and the crew, yeah.
Absolutely. Who are all very experienced, very, very qualified.
Right.
And they've all been to these places many times, and judging weather or conditions or anything like that, it's quite often we can make, hopefully, the right decisions as to, okay, well, let's do this, or let's not do that. It really is just that flexibility is great, and something you don't get on the big big expedition ships. It's they're sticking to a schedule. Mm-hmm. They have to be here, they have to be there, and they have to be at the end. That's it
in the matter, and you're along for the ride basically. And you talk about the experience of the crew and the captain. I'd imagine that 100% of your guests are going to be down there taking pictures, and they're not all going to be professional photographers. And your experience as a trip leader and as a photographer really comes in beyond. It comes in handy. I mean, it's invaluable to have somebody there to guide them and to show them how to use their kit. And I'm sure that's just something that guests really look for when they're planning a trip down here.
And that's something that I try and do as much of. I mean, on top of the fact that the destinations that I go to, or that we go to, are all destinations that I absolutely love and that I'm excited to go to every single time.
Right.
So I want to give everyone that I take the absolute best experience once I'm there. Mm-hmm. So, if that means doing, getting 2 hours sleep a night because we're trying to get it. That's what happens, It's
showbiz, man.
Yeah. It's you're just along for the ride for that week or 2 or 3 or whatever it is. It's right. You just do whatever you have to make that the best possible experience. And on top of just being in these places, which is amazing, and mm-hmm. trying to get the best positions and the best vantage points is the photography advice, and from the moment that someone books with me to the time that they're back at home editing photos and things like that, I'll provide how much or however little photography advice that the people are after, even down to selecting cameras if people are going to buy a camera specific to the trip, and then once we're actually on the vessel, it's all about getting a great photo if that's what you want to do,
And you can tutor guests with different kits and gears, whether it's Nikon, Canon,
Absolutely, it's covering all different cameras. I can hold lectures on board as well, on different photography subjects, cool. and that's something that's something that's in the flexibility of having your own vessel is. If you do want to do a 3-hour landing in the morning, mm-hmm. and then we're going to travel for 5 hours to the next place that's worth seeing, what do you want to do in that time? Do you want to rest, or do you want to sit there and I can get up there and give an hour lecture on a particular photography subject,
awesome.
or what we also do is towards the end of the day, give a rough outline of what we're planning on doing the next day, so people know what to expect. People know what they can plan on what they sort of are going to see. Is it going to be, say, with the Russian Far East, is it going to be a day going up a fjord where there's going to be 6 bears like running around the sides of the mountains that we're going to try and photograph, or are we going to go to a flat, some flats where the local ranger is going to put out a spread for us of different meats and fishes and local fare, and then we'll go for a walk for a mile to a hot spring pool that they've set up there. and just sit there in the Russian mountains in a hot spring pool drinking beer and champagne. You know, it's so you can mix it up. You can mix it up like that as well. And I mean, on top of that, I can and again, part of the prior planning is I can organise different specialists or experts to be on board as well. You know, I've got a lot of colleagues and friends that are marine biologists that have all been to these places, that are very experienced. You know, naturalists, historians, geologists, whatever tickles your fancy.
Right.
You know, we can organise for that person to be on the boat for the journey,
and the beauty of the private charter tailor-made element of the whole thing.
Absolutely. I mean, if you wanted a masseuse to be on the boat for the whole time, you can have that as well. It's totally up to you. And with the scientific experts, you know, again, it's up to you on how much you want to be informed. Right. Do you want them to give a lecture a day, or do you want them to give a lecture every 3 days, and then go out on the zodiacs with you and give you all the information and advice while you're looking at the wildlife and photographing it? You know, I mean, most of these scientists are pretty avid photographers because of the destinations that they go to as well.
Why not?
So
Why wouldn't
it's
you?
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's Absolutely. How I got into it. I mean, the first time I went to Africa, Adrian, I had a point and click like little Sony thing, and I'm like in the vehicle, and I'm so uncomfortable that everybody else around me has these tricked out kits, and I come back in these pitiful photos of like a leopard way up in a tree, you know.
Yeah.
So like the scientists you're talking about, they start off as scientists, but then kind of like you know, you kind of like evolve into, you know, an aspiring photographer.
Absolutely. And a lot of them come out with a lot of good images, you know. Yeah. It's and especially with the time that they've put into these places too, you know. Everyone's been to Antarctica 20 times or whatever they've done. And you know, it's, if you haven't got a good photo in that time, well, there's something wrong. Yeah.
Something's wrong. Well, yeah, you're definitely not gonna, you know, put somebody in the hands of an amateur or anything like that. And I just think it's awesome that you're hands-on, you're on site, and that you know the places inside and out, and that's the experience is invaluable.
Absolutely, and I think that it's part of the experience is the yacht itself as well. Yeah. You know, totally. So we can. You know, depending at the start of each season, certain yachts will allocate where they're going to be in the world. So if you want to go to that part of the world, well, you might have the selection of 3, 4, 5, 6 yachts that you can pick from, and you can say, right, I want that one. And you know, obviously, there's different levels of luxury or capacity or ability or capabilities of that size, all of that sort of thing of the yachts, and you can make your selection and then go from there. But and
we're going to throw up a few photos of like some of the images that you showed me of the yachts that you have available are incredible. I mean,
they're amazing. The luxury on some of these yachts is just, you know, it's well and truly world class. You know, guests seldom go without. It's you know, beautiful bedrooms, massive dining rooms, world-class chef, world-class crew and staff and services. You know, some have got, you know, Finnish saunas, or you know, another boat might have a fully equipped gym with a spa on the back deck, and you know, it just depends. Obviously, it depends which yacht that you want to pick, and it also depends on what service you want. You might pick the yacht based on what it provides, basically, instead of the other way around. You know,
so hey, to each their own. You know,
absolutely.
There's no right or wrong answer. There's only your answer, and you know, one of the cool parts about being in this business is you meet all sorts of different personalities with different preferences, and you learn what works, and you have the professional network to get it done.
And I think that's the main thing when we're talking about the yachts and the service that I provide is that it is just, I suppose flexibility is the right word, and flexibility and being accommodating, and we can provide, given enough time and communication, we can provide, you know, a broad range of things that are going to cover what most people need. And even if you come up with something outlandish, we can even try and make that happen. Yeah.
Is there briefly back to stories? Is there any kind of like over the top request that you've accommodated before that you can comment on?
There's one that I definitely can't comment on. Again. Well, maybe we should throw that in with the flexibility and being accommodating is confidentiality as well.
Always.
But I mean, outlandish is a subjective term, right? I think that's the other thing with these yachts is that once you do select the yacht itself on a certain amount of yachts, then you get down to selecting, okay, well, what other things do we want on there? Do we want the helicopter on there? Do we want the submarine? Or do we want the Zodiacs or the motorbikes or the speedboat or or do we want none of that? And do we want to make this a pure photography thing? It's
so. How many toys do you want? What do you want to do?
Exactly. We can call it how outlandish do you want to be, but right. It's not really outlandish.
Remember,
right?
That's a relative subjective term.
Yes.
It's like luxury,
Yeah, and I think that's the key word with a lot of these yachts too, is luxury. It is just it's phenomenal, and that combined with the service of the crew and the staff is it's well and truly worthwhile, and it's an experience that the people generally don't forget in a hurry. But it goes part and parcel with what you're seeing. It's
I'd imagine, and we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask one more question, especially with where we are in the world. What would you suggest? We're going to put up all of your contacts and everything, so the viewers can contact you. We'll put a link to your email address, website, socials, so they can look at everything. I want to talk about booking window coming out of COVID-19. Any thoughts or comments or guidance for guests that are looking to plan a trip right now?
At the moment, there's a lot fewer options than what there regularly would be. And that's basically down to the fact of a lot of unknowns right now.
Yeah.
And owners don't want to put their yachts in a position where, a country is not going to logistically service that yacht. So those decisions are getting made still. And into next year, like basically this year, the whole Antarctic season was cancelled.
Yeah.
For
the territory.
For the major cruise lines and private yachts, it just, it's people just said no. And a lot of that fact for the private cruise lines was of just getting serviced out of, Chile or Argentina.
It's got to be a nightmare.
It just wasn't possible. So people are hoping for the Arctic season next year. That's nothing confirmed as yet.
Right.
Last year, there was one yacht that did head into Greenland for a couple of just a little trips. I don't know whether they're going to be doing the same thing, but we're going to wait for some answers there.
Sure.
I'm assuming next Antarctic season, with the speed that the vaccine is coming out and whether people want to take it. I'm assuming that the next year Antarctic season will go ahead in some sort of capacity.
Right.
Whether that be with stricter regulations or something, I have no idea. I mean, it could be with no regulations, right? We don't know at this point. There is one trip I got told about the yacht, the Ragnar, actually. They're heading into Greenland in April, May. Well, they're planning on doing that.
Sure.
And being in that area and running a few heli skiing ventures up there. Cool. And obviously you can sightsee and all that sort of stuff while you're as an option. So that's something that's a possibility there. The Ragnar's going to be up in there. But I think you could, without promising anything to anyone, you could reasonably assume that the Arctic season in maybe July or something might have a few
Okay.
few yachts going up there.
Cool.
But
well, our goal is to plant seeds for people's minds to start like really considering something like this.
yeah, and I think it's good to it's good to have these trips and the locations in the back of people's minds, like you said, and even if they start researching the places that they want to go to now, by the time everyone's ready to travel and feel safe and secure, and and we've hopefully got the virus under some sort of control. The people will be ready to head out, and I don't know whether life will be back to normal for the next year or two, but I'm sure it'll be some.
You'll be able to do something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think a lot of this, especially with the private element, you're kind of you're okay with the unknown, and you're already flexible to begin with. So and you can do anything kind of on site and in advance as well. Kind of a nice balance.
I think that's a good thing about being flexible. Yeah, you sort of okay when something pops up. Well, we're kitted out for that because each trip is so individual anyway.
Sure.
There's no way that I sit down and say, okay, well, we're running the Arctic season. These are the trips. It just doesn't work like that.
And it just works as a bookend.
No, because I'm going to cater to whatever people want to do on their particular trip. It's So it's once the yachts decide that they're going to be running and countries decide that they're going to service them logistically, I'll know to start putting that out there, and then we can start organizing experiences for people again. Which will be great. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, man, I'm looking forward to it too, and I wanted to thank you so much for coming on today. This has been awesome. And again, I'm gonna do another plug right here for your contact details, and you've just been awesome to chat with. So, listen, man, thanks so much. Best of luck to you. I know you've got a knee recovery coming up, so hope that goes well. And just appreciate your time, man. This has been fascinating.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me on here, Justin. I appreciate your time actually of having me on here. And I've always enjoyed your stories of Africa and places like that. So it's great to share some of these with you.
Well, yeah, it's like once you get somebody that's in the wildlife or the safari business, so to speak, it's you got instantly click and share different experiences from different parts of the world. So it's a really cool kind of common language,
Oh, absolutely, and it's just the differences the world over. But like you said, it is that there's differences with the various locations, but there's the common ground of okay, we love to travel, and I suppose it goes. We'll finish this off by going back to the start. We're all brainwashed by those little yellow bordered books, and now we can experience it. It's
right.
It's an amazing thing to be able to do.
Hell yes, man, absolutely. All right, man. Well, with that, I will leave you to it, and have a great evening. And we'll be in touch, man.
No worries. Cheers. Take care of yourself.
Cheers, man. You too.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you for listening to Smart Aspirations. Justin Huff is the manager of Swaggy Swan Travel. For all travel-related inquiries, please visit www.swaggyswan.com. That's www.swaggyswan.com. And click Inquiries. Have a stupendous day, and we'll see you next week.